It's always nice to end an opening session with a theme song. So if you want to listen it again, I've heard that it will be placed on our website of the conference. So listen it again during this conference. And then now it's time to introduce the keynote speaker of today, Professor Ruben Vanderlinde of Ghent University. And I promised Ruben not to introduce him as an expert of Belgian beers. So I won't, Ruben. But if you want to ask something about that, ask him during the break. Ruben Vanderlinde is working at the Department of Educational Studies, and he's responsible for the teacher education programs of his university in Ghent. Over the past years, Ruben has been conducting research and publishing in a variety of topics in the field of education and educational innovation, like the integration of ICT in education, teacher induction, family-school partnerships, teacher training, and teacher educators' professional development. And with regard to this latter topic, in 2017, one of his PhD students finished her dissertation about teacher educators' professional development concerning to what they called a researcherly disposition. And I'm hoping he's going to talk about that today. Therefore, it's not surprising that Ruben is a founding member of InfoTED, the International Forum for Teacher Educators Development. And if you are interested in InfoTED, Google InfoTED and explore the website, because it's an international forum with a lot of interesting information about teacher educators development. He is secretary of the Flemish Forum for Educational Research, and he has been, from 2012 to 2015, a member of the EAPRIL board. And I'm therefore proud to announce the keynote of Professor Ruben Vanderlinde, entitled Practitioner Research and Hidden Secret for the Professional Development. Give him a warm applause, and Ruben, the floor is yours. You're welcome.
Thank you, Martijn. Dear colleagues, good morning. No talk today about Belgian beers. But what a beautiful day, snowy, but still very beautiful. And thank you so much for your nice introduction words. I'm really honored to be here today for the opening keynote of the 12th EAPRIL conference. And as Sirpa, Martijn, and Ideke know, and all the others, I'm always very happy if I can join the EAPRIL community, and I'm really honored to be here today, this morning. So, I have a PhD in technology, but no, I have my own. I think, yeah, I'm out of batteries probably. So let's start. What can you expect from me during this morning? In my lecture, I will speak about two topics that really intrigued me from the moment I started as a researcher in the field of education. And the first topic of this morning is about the difficult relation between educational research and educational practice. And although many people still talk about this relation in terms of being a gap or being problematic, I'll try to illustrate the steps that we as a community we have made from problem analysis to the exploration of concrete scenarios that can actually bridge this so-called gap. I'm also going to illustrate that we have to add more nuances to this debate or to this topic. And in the second part of my presentation, I'll have a look at some of these scenarios that can bridge the gap between research and practice, and I will focus on practitioner research and practice-oriented research. And more specifically, I'll try to illustrate that these research strategies, which are in the heart of EAPRIL, that these research strategies are also strategies for professional development, and I will formulate a theoretical argument, and I'm also going to illustrate my argument with a practical example in the context of teacher education, the research project of Hannah Tak, which was Martijn was referring to. But let's start, and let's go back in time. More specifically, let's go back to 2006. And I make this trip through time because I think that to talk about practitioner research and practice-oriented research today, we first need to understand the history of the relation between research and practice in the educational field. In 2006, yeah, it was the year that Italy won the World Cup of football. It was the year that the Iraq dictator Saddam Hussein was executed. And maybe 2006, you also remember the hype about the movie Borat. But 2006 was also the year that Finland won for the first time in the history the Eurovision Song Contest with the performance of Lordi Hard Rock Hallelujah. 2006 was also the year that this young guy started his research career in the educational field. And 2006 was also the year that the first EAPRIL conference was organized, or that EAPRIL was founded. And what you see here is a first picture of the EAPRIL conference in Leuven. And my intention was to ask people, do you recognize yourself in the picture? But I just understood that it's only Sirpa and Frank who could probably recognize him in the picture. So 2006 is, in my opinion, it's an important year. I think we can call it a milestone for people with an interest in practitioner or practice-oriented research. And for me, this little travel back in time is to illustrate that since 2006, so since the founding of EAPRIL, as an association, as a community, a lot has changed when we talk about the relation between educational research and educational practice. And I think that the situation in 2006 was about the comic I'll present to illustrate what the difficult relation between educational research and educational practice was or even is about. So normally it goes like this. Okay. This comic illustrates that EAPRIL was not founded by coincidence, but that 10 years ago, different actors in the field wanted to react against the pessimistic voices that cast doubt on the value and use of educational research. And just to illustrate, I'll show you some of these voices going back to 2006 and even before that time. For instance, Kiesel speaks about the awful reputation of educational research. Or what do you think about the hardest to do science of all? Or educational research has no credibility. Badly argues that educational research is in crisis. And Kennedy words is very sharp that the main thing we have learned from educational research is that we have not learned much from educational research. So, in response to these pessimistic voices, one of the first tasks that has to be done was to map this difficult relation between educational research and practice. So going beyond the rhetoric and trying to understand the problem, what is going on in the field of educational research. In one of our own studies, we described the relation between research and practice in more detail as a reaction against the slogans found in the literature. And our study shows that many different problems are described. And some of these problems are situated within the field of educational research, some are situated within the practitioners, and some are situated within the researchers themselves. For instance, some of the problems, educational research yields only few conclusive results or only few practical and useful results. Educational research is underfinanced. When we have a look at the practitioners, practitioners believe that educational research is not conclusive or not practical enough. They make little use of educational research, or they are not competent to do so, and researchers have little possibilities to publish in practitioner journals. They are forced to publish in international peer-reviewed journals, and so on, and so on, and so on. So a lot of problems and a complexity of problems. So if you look at all these problems, and if you look at the problem analysis, one could ask the question, Ruben, are you pessimistic? And people who know me better, they know that I'm never pessimistic. And I'm especially optimistic for the future when it's about using and producing research in the educational practice. And I really like this statement of the Canadian researcher Ben Levin. And I also agree with him that we should be aware of the complex nature of the relation between educational research and practice, and that we should move from problem analysis to concrete scenarios that have the potential to bridge the gap between research and practice. And my opinion is that thanks to EAPRIL, the debate about the nature of educational research in general and the relation between research and practice has reached a mature level, taking into account the nuances and the complexity in the field. And I even go further by saying that bringing these nuances in the debate in 10 years' time, so since the founding in 2006, is quite exceptional, and I think it deserves a lot of credits for all the people involved in EAPRIL and all the people today here in this audience. And more concretely, I think that when it comes to the complexity and to these nuances, 3 elements are nowadays more obvious than in 2006. I think we have more fine-grained concepts when talking about each other about this difficult concept of research. And I think we also have more information on what I call actors and factors that add nuances in the debate and in the field. Let's have a look at these 3 elements. The first nuance is that nowadays we are more clear in the use of our concepts and terms, especially when it comes to a word like research. And we all should be aware that educational research is an umbrella concept. And here you see 3 kinds of research: fundamental research, policy-oriented research, and practice-oriented research. And all of these research strategies have their own underlying financial systems, their own output mechanisms, quality indicators, and so on and so on. And moreover, the produced knowledge of educational research can be situated on a continuum from instrumental knowledge to real conceptual knowledge. And I hope that it's obvious that speaking and discussing about the relation between research and practice should be handled differently according to the kind of research we conduct. And my opinion is that we need all kinds of research, we need all these 3 kinds of research, and I think they should be more influential to each other. So maybe another challenge for EAPRIL for the next 10 years. A second nuance is related to the fact that in this research and practice debate, more people and more organizations are acting than just the researchers over there and the practitioners over there. I think that during the last 10 years, we have learned to emphasize the role of the so-called mediators or intermediaries, like in-service trainers, pedagogical counselors, teacher trainers, educational media, think tanks, and so on. And I think that we have learned that these are important actors as collaboration partners for researchers and for practitioners. And besides, one of the best parts of EAPRIL is that all these actors are participating at the annual conference. So in this audience, you will find practitioners, you will find researchers, you will find mediators like teacher educators, policymakers, and so on. And I think that's one of the many reasons why EAPRIL is so unique. So it brings together all actors involved in the field of educational research and practice. It's not a conference for one specific audience. No, it's a conference for all people involved in the field of producing and using educational research into educational practice. The third nuance is that we now, I think now in 2017, so since 2006, I think we have more information about barriers and facilitators explaining why some teachers or some schools read, translate, use, or conduct research more than other teachers or other schools do. I just listed them. Barriers refer to, for instance, the lack of applicability or the technical and complex language of research publications. And on the other hand, some facilitators, for instance, referring to the practicality of the research results, the available time teachers have to read and use research, or the pressure teachers experience to use specific results. And besides, a little promo, if you want to learn more about these elements and the complexity of the field, so about the first part of my keynote, I am happy to recommend you our publication in the British Educational Research Journal. So that was the first part of my keynote, and I think enough history for today. Let's have a look at the future, and let's look at what practitioner and practice-oriented research look like in 2017. As these are two concrete scenarios to bridge the gap between research and practice, and I think that, and to think about new kinds of knowledge construction, knowledge dissemination, and knowledge use in the field of education. And nowadays, when we talk about practitioner or practice-oriented research, I think it's clear that we talk about what Gibbons, already in 1994, described as Mode 2 research. And in this table, you see the characteristics of Mode 2 research. And I think it's clear that these characteristics fit within the goals of practice-oriented, practice-based, and practitioner research. But as I just argued, I think we should be more clear and transparent in the concepts we use. And sometimes we use practice-oriented or practice-based research and practitioner research as synonyms, and that's not correct. I think in 2017, nowadays, we have the correct concepts, so let's use them also in the correct way. And for me, practice-oriented or practice-based research is research that is relevant to the practice field, and that practice field can be in kindergarten, can be in primary schools, secondary schools, or higher education institution. So practice-based or practice-oriented research is research that aims at supporting decisions or at developing new knowledge that contributes to solving practical problems. And similar, but not the same, practitioner research is research where the practitioner, as the researcher, is researching his own practice. So here you see that the context for study are the professional practice, which frames communities of practice and collaboration. So here you see that the boundaries between inquiry and practice are blurred, and more blurred than in practitioner or practice-oriented research. And I think that when looking at the last 10 years, thanks to EAPRIL, we found some interesting studies describing the benefits of practitioner research and practice-oriented research. For instance, these kinds of research or these strategies can actually bridge the gap between research and practice. We also know that these are good strategies for knowledge development, for professional development, for collaboration between different peoples involved in the field, and so on and so on. Moreover, research also shows some additional benefits for practitioner research and for practice-oriented research. So we also have a more differentiated view on the benefits of these kinds of research strategies. Just have a look, for instance, at some additional benefits for practice-oriented research. It supports school improvement processes, it enhances collaboration, it supports schools' data literacy in schools, and so on. Going to the title of my keynote, one of the major benefits of practitioner research and practice-oriented research is that it also offers an ideal context or method for professional development. And I think we sometimes forget about that. So that's why in the third part of my keynote, I try to illustrate why that's the case. and I do this on a theoretical level with some conceptual arguments, but I'm also going to illustrate my arguments in the fourth part of my keynote with a concrete research project with a concrete example. But again, concepts. What kind of concept do we use when we talk about professional development or professional development initiatives? In my studies and my research group, we like to start with the basic model of DeSimone. And in this model, professional development consists of a number of consecutive steps. First step, professional development starts with experiences of student teachers, educators, other professionals when taking part in professional development interventions. Second, these professional development initiatives change participants, so teachers or teacher educators, change participants' knowledge, skills, attitudes, beliefs. Third, so that their new skills, their knowledge, their new attitudes, and their new beliefs are ordered to improve the content of instruction or their approach to pedagogy, or even both. And fourth, with the ultimate goal that these changed instructional practices foster increased student learning processes. So this means that starting from this model, different research questions can be tested. And researchers formulate these questions in three categories. A first category is what we call a theory of change, or testing a theory of change. And this refers to relations between characteristics of the professional development activities, of the professional development initiatives on the one hand, and teachers' changed knowledge, skills, attitudes, beliefs, and practices on the other hand. A second kind of questions we ask is what we call testing a theory of instruction, referring to the influences of changed teaching practices on students' learning and on students' achievement. And third is what we call a theory of improvement. It's the box below, which refers to the influence of school organizational or school cultural conditions on successful learning of teachers and students. So let's have a look at this first theory of change, as this first theory of change has implications for practitioner and practice-oriented research. And based on a literature review with our research group, we extended this model, so we extended DeSimone's model by adding more detailed information by every block based on a literature review. In this way, I think we have more concepts and variables when we test all possible relations when it comes to studying professional development in our field. And for those interested in our extended model, I'm happy to refer to our paper published last year about the model in Research Papers in Education. But the most interesting part, in my opinion, for the model is to focus on the first block of this model. And this block describes features or characteristics of successful interventions when it comes to professional development in the field of education. So if I put it differently, this block presents design principles that we can use in constructing and developing professional development activities in education. Let's have a look at these design principles. In the next slide, I listed all the design principles for effective professional development found in literature. First, it's about realizing a clear focus on content and student learning. Next, it's about enhancing pedagogical knowledge. Third, we know that successful professional development initiatives are coherent and evidence-based, so they are both theory-based and research-based informed. Next principle is called ownership, meaning that teachers should experience, or professional development should respond to their individual needs and to their individual interests. We further know that professional development activities are intensive and take some time, so it's not about single-shot initiatives, but it's about extended and intensive programs. Next principle, We know that collective or collaborative participation is an important element. We also know that school or site-based initiatives are more successful than external organized activities. So it's not about sending teachers to external offices. No, it's about incorporating professional development into their daily work. And last but not least, we know that active learning processes or continuous inquiry and of practice and reflection is of major importance. This is not new. What is new, in my opinion, is that when looking at this extended model for professional development, I think we have a clear list of features or characteristics of successful professional development activities. So in other words, if we are able to realize all these features, or if we are able to realize all these characteristics in practice, we will be able to realize effective professional development leading towards real changes in practice. Dear colleagues, this is a crucial moment in my lecture. Do you also see the similarities with practitioner research and practice-oriented research? I'm going to give you a new definition. In my definition, practitioner research and practice-oriented research is research with a clear content focus to solve practical problems and to enhance the pedagogical knowledge and skills of practitioners, based on evidence and active learning processes. Because of its starting point in teachers' and educators' professional practice, it's realized ownership. Practitioner research and practice-oriented research is research in which practitioners collaborate with each other. It's not a single shot intervention, but a long-term endeavor situated in concrete school practices. So, now that we know that practitioner research and practice-oriented research have the potential to really impact the life and practices of teachers and teacher educators, let's look at a concrete example. And this is what I'm going to do now in the fourth part of my lecture. I illustrate a research project in which practitioner research, so in which the practitioners study their own practice, in which practitioner research is used as a lever for professional development of teacher educators. But maybe I first need to give you some background information of this research project, and also on, Martijn has also referring to it, on professional development of teacher educators. And although we see that many studies have been published on teachers and their professional development, surprisingly, little attention has been paid to teacher educators from a research, a practice, and a policy perspective. And I think this limited attention is strange, as teacher educators, and I think hopefully we all agree on that, are responsible and have an important role to play as they are educating the next generation of teachers. So I think that we should pay explicit attention to the professional development of teacher educators, especially because, in my opinion, teacher educators are a unique and specific occupational group. Why? Because teacher educators are not just experienced primary or secondary school teachers. So I don't agree if one is a good teacher in primary or secondary schools, this expertise will automatically carry over to one's work with novice teachers. Further, I think that teacher educators are different than other teachers teaching in higher education. They have a unique responsibility in what we call in the literature as second-order teachers. So teacher educators teach about teaching. That's what we mean with second-order teachers. Russell speaks in this context about how I teach is the message. So this means that in the teaching practice of a teacher educator, it becomes clear what you do as a teacher educator. So your thinking, your feeling, your actions about teacher education becomes visible and clear for your audience. So in the way we teach to our students in teacher education, we show them, we show the next generation of teachers how future and good education can look like. So the practice of a teacher educator is of crucial importance. Given this important role of teacher educators, again, it's surprisingly to see that the professional development of teacher educators across Europe, and there are some countries where it's better organized than others, but in a general way, the professional development of teacher educators across Europe is organized in an ad hoc way. So there are no formal training initiatives, only short-term and local professional initiatives or activities are provided for teacher educators. But what's more, when we speak about teacher educators' professional development and think about what I just said about how I teaches the message, about the quote of Russell, it should always start from teacher educators who critically investigate their own practice. Teacher educators who study, who question, and make their research, their professional practice public to others. So teacher educators need to become teacher educators researchers. Or they need to develop a research attitude. They need to develop a researchly disposition, onderzoekende houding in Dutch. Okay, you are still awake. And I think that can be supported by practitioner research. Let's continue with my previous point. In the research projects I'll now present, professional development was conceptualized as becoming a teacher educator researcher or developing a researchly disposition. And researchly disposition was further described as operationalized as the habit of mind to engage with research as both a consumer and as a producer of research, to improve your own practice and to contribute to the knowledge base on teacher education. And we further developed a scale to quantitatively measure this concept. And that's for the people who like numbers. Our concepts of researchly disposition consist of 4 subscales. A first scale is about valuing research. A second scale is being a smart consumer of research. A third scale is labeled as able to conduct research. And the fourth measurement scale is really conducting research into practice. And if you are interested in our conceptual and empirical work on this concept, I'm happy to recommend you our paper published last year in the EAPRIL special issue in Vocations and Learning. And by the way, all credits for this work goes to Hannah Tak, who defended last summer her PhD on this topic. So going back to the research project I am presenting today. The goal of that project was to advance insights into the impact of a 1-year intervention in practitioner research on teacher educators' professional development or on their development of their researchly disposition. So practitioner research was the intervention context. Think about what I just said about all the characteristics of successful professional development. And we wanted to know if teacher educators, what do they learn? What do they learn about themselves as teacher educators? What do they learn about their role as teacher educator researcher? And are they able to develop a researchly disposition? To assess the impacts of this 1-year intervention on practitioner research, of practitioner research, we adopted a mixed method research approach with an intervention and a control group design. So we split up the teacher educators in 2 groups, a control group and an experimental group who was taking part in the intervention context, which was the practitioner research study. This means that both quantitative and qualitative data were collected before, during, immediately after, and up until 8 months after the intervention. And more specifically, for the quantitative part, we administered the scales I've just presented with these nice numbers. I like it. I will now present the most important results related to this study. The first important result was that, given the benefits of practitioner research, what I also mentioned in the first part of my keynote, we found a diversity of research projects to deal with concrete, practical problems of teacher educators. Here you see some topics or illustrations about the content of the practitioner research projects of our teacher educators participating in the project. For instance, how to deal with the growing diversity in my student-teacher population, what are my important professional roles as a beginning teacher educator, or a project about new assessment methodology, and a project, for instance, about historical reasoning and how to stimulate historical reasoning in last year's student teachers. And what's also special is that during this conference, some teacher educators from our project are also presenting their practitioner research project during the next days. So that was the first result. Next result, going back to our concept of research attitude, researchly disposition, we also found an effect on the subscales of our central concept, researchly disposition, for those participants taking part in the practitioner research project or in the intervention context. What you see here is the first positive intervention effect, and we only focus on the blue and the orange bars. So the blue boxes are the pre-test numbers, and the orange boxes are the results of the post-test data. And this intervention effect is related to the scale of conducting research. So it means that the intervention not only contributes to the improvement of teacher educators' practice, but that they also conduct more research and that they communicate about their research and they disseminate their research to other colleagues in the field. Next to this quantitative effect, we found some interesting interview data. And here you see two citations of teacher educators arguing that they would like to conduct more research in their daily practice. For instance, the first one, I'm going to continue this practitioner research. I still have to finish a follow-up interview with my students to evaluate the syllabi I have developed during the intervention. If possible, I would be very willing to present my study to other teacher educators, maybe at EAPRIL, who also have an interest in differentiated instruction. And then another one argues that our further professional development and engagement in research should be a formal part of our job responsibility. Dedicated research time should be timetabled, because this would help me preserve research time and actually give me permission to conduct research. A second positive intervention effect is related to the scale of being a smart consumer of research. And in our project, we found that teacher educators were convinced that they would continue to use and read existing research to improve their professional practice. They further argued that up to 8 months after participation in the intervention, that they frequently used research literature and that they argue that they are more up-to-date about recent research about the education of future teachers. We can also illustrate this result with some citations of teacher educators arguing that they will continue to read and use more scientific research in their work. Let's have a look, for instance, at the first citation. It already changed my teaching practice during the intervention. My students even noticed I tried to ground my lessons in research literature and provide them with references of scientific articles and documents afterwards. Related to the scale of being able to conduct research, we found no significant changes, and even you see here a slight decrease between the pre-test and the post-test data. However, we did note some important qualitative changes. So because of the qualitative data analysis, we were able to understand the slight decrease of the subscale of to be able to conduct research after participation in the intervention. And maybe some information. Almost all the participants had at least a master's degree resulting in a master's thesis upon completion of their study. So during the intake interviews, it was apparent that these previous experiences led to increased confidence when estimating one's own ability to conduct research, practitioner research, into teacher education. However, after the intervention, teacher educators were more realistic when assessing this impact. And here you see some illustrations of some citations illustrating this. And let's have, for instance, a look at the second one, under the first one, who is arguing that I thought it was only a matter of refreshing previously acquired skills and knowledge, but I was wrong. Conducting practitioner research requires specific methodological skills. There is even a quote about that topic here. So conducting practitioner research requires specific methodological skills. I have learned how important it is to take time to formulate a good research question. And I have learned about alternative data collection methods I have never heard of before. And then for our last subscale, also related to the scale of valuing research, we did not find any significant changes based on our quantitative analysis. However, again, the qualitative findings revealed some interesting information. Let's have a look, for instance, at the second citation, teacher educator, who is arguing, I need to keep abreast of the research literature on innovations in teacher education and explicitly study my own decisions in practice based on the belief that, as a teacher of teachers, I am responsible for the quality of the education of future teachers. And that was based on an exit interview. So my conclusion for this fourth part of my presentation, I think that, again, this project shows the potential of practitioner research to solve practical problems. Here it was in the context of teacher educators researching their own teacher education practice. So we found that in our practitioner projects, we found a broad variety of topics representing all kinds of issues that are challenging for teacher educators. And they are all aimed at improving teacher educators' professional practice. But in my opinion, what's more interesting is that we were also able to map the underlying processes of using practitioner research as a strategy for professional development, as a strategy to become a teacher educator researcher, and to have a more clear and transparent view on what does it mean doing, using, reading research as a teacher educator. So we see that teacher educators become researchers, both as producers, they go to conferences like EAPRIL, and both as consumers. And also we see that teacher educators learn about their role as second-order teachers. So they do not learn only about their role as a researcher, they also learn about their role as second-order teachers, about being a teacher of teachers. They do not only develop their role as teachers, they also develop their own identity as teacher educators because of the practitioner research projects. Let's have a look. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Martin. It's obvious. Dear colleagues, dear members, I think it's time to present some overall conclusions, and I prepared 4 statements to conclude my keynote and to stimulate further debate. First conclusion. During the last 10 years, I think we moved with the research and practice field in education from problem analysis consisting of pessimistic voices to concrete scenarios containing new kinds of knowledge production, knowledge translation, and knowledge use in the field of education. Second conclusion, thanks to organizations as EAPRIL, we have a more nuanced view on how research impacts the educational professional practice. We do not only know that this relation is influenced by different actors and supporting or hindering factors, we were also able to create a common language to describe these processes in a more appropriate way. And third conclusion, when looking at literature on professional development in education, we see that this literature describes several features or design principles for effective professional development. These features or design principles are exactly what practitioner research and practice-oriented research is about. So in other words, practitioner research and practice-oriented research is the only strategy for professional development that really matters. And my fourth conclusion, concrete research studies like the Professional Development Initiative with Flemish teacher educators illustrate the added value of practitioner and practice-oriented research for professional development. Practitioners do not only formulate solutions to their professional practice, they also become a better researcher, both as consumer and as producer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben, for your inspiring keynote. I think there's still room left for some questions or comments. And I've heard that there is a microphone somewhere, even two. So raise your hand and you get the microphone to ask your question. Has somebody a question or a comment for Ruben?
First of all, Ruben, I'd like to thank you for your wonderful presentation. And I have a question related to the model of DeSimone, because you presented the results from your research with the Flemish teachers, becoming better researchers. And my question is, did you also look, when you go on in this model, what how it influenced their attitudes, their beliefs, and also their teacher behavior, and finally results with students?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. We did look at the second and the third block. So we did look at their identity, their beliefs, their attitudes. We also looked with some observation data how it changed their teaching practice, but we did not look for if it's really changed also students' learning processes. But we hope, we are applying for a new project, and we hope to also in this new project to finally also can have a look at, is there a relation between professional development activities, change beliefs, change practices, and change students' learning processes of students in teacher education. Because I really think that this is the kind of research we need in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, another question.
Ruben, thank you for your wonderful keynote. But I'm still wondering, it seems that you're still talking about two kinds of worlds.
No.
Teaching, research, innovation, research. Is it not coming a time that we have to think about more a transition or a transformation, that research and innovation is becoming more coincide, that it's maybe even the motor of innovation, and that we not should talk anymore about teacher researcher, but maybe about teachers?
Correct. I don't agree that I still speak about two worlds. I think that was I was trying to do in the first part of my research. I think we really moved from these two kinds of worlds, and I think we have, sometimes you have researchers, you have practitioners, you have researcher practitioners, you have practitioner researchers, and sometimes fundamental research has more practical value than the other way around. So I think it's a really blurred world for the moment, which is a good point. So I don't agree that I still speak about two kinds of worlds. I think that we are, especially here in this audience, and I know that in other conferences, they still speak about the duality in research and practice, but I think in this audience, with this community, with this organization, we moved into one world. If it's a good idea to speak about a teacher? I hope so, I hope so. I think that's really the future, and it should be, I hope it will, within the next 10 years, it will be obvious that if a teacher is describing his professional practice, it's automatically that he's doing that in a research or a researchly way. Yeah.
Is there another question or comment, or are you longing for coffee? Well, then it's time. Thank you, Ben.
Hello, hello.
I'm here the whole day.
I have one more question before we go to coffees and teas and everything. Thank you so much.
Ruben, I
There
also.
are two for the moment.
Hello.
There are even two.
Oh, sorry.
There's
Who's first?
Arnoud, can you? Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. All right, thank you. Okay, again, thank you for this very inspiring presentation. I think what you have done is that I think we can improve our education. But what I'm curious about is how much research do you intend, or how much, if you qualify it in time, because all teachers they say, we don't have any time to do research. How much do you think is needed to improve? Or is it anything?
You want a number, or?
Well, how would you define it?
But I think that's a difficult question, because
I
sometimes you really, as a teacher, for instance, in the teacher education project, sometimes you really need time to research your own practice. But sometimes it's just enough to have time to go to a conference and to read research. So that's what I'm also trying to say in the slide when I'm speaking about the umbrella concept of research. What is research is about? Is it really conducting research, being a producer of research? Then we need more time. But sometimes it's just okay if we can consume research and if we can use research to justify the decisions we make in our professional practice.
Attitude.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ruben, thank you very much for your inspiring talk. I really like the topic, this linking, bridging research and practice. Do you also agree that I think one of a big problem you addressed it in the beginning is that still, for example, randomized controlled trial is a very dominant paradigm for doing research in the traditional, if you can call it traditional sciences. And so is it also like how can we change this? How can we change this dominance of one paradigm? And also, how can we open the debate for and make research methodology broader than only that?
Yeah, I think I have a very simple and very difficult answer. I think we should voice our message. We should be more proud of the kind of research we conduct. We should be more visible when we go abroad. We should be more visible in our country when we present our practitioner or practice-oriented research projects. I think it's just a matter of being visible and being proud of what we are doing.
Thank you very much. Very nice answer. Thank you.
Ruben, thank you for your inspiring keynote. We have a little gift for you.
Thank you.
And to everyone, enjoy your break and enjoy the conference.